Sean Meagher. Okay, Sean, you've got 3 minutes starting now.
Thanks. Good morning. I wanted to speak briefly to the question that the mayor and the social development chair and the budget chief have raised all day. If we disagree with the proposals on the table, they asked what would we recommend. So let me make a list. First, don't go around saying you can easily eliminate oodles of wasted tax money if you actually haven't identified any of that waste. And certainly when you spend $3 million on consultants to find that waste, and they can't find any cuts more attractive than daycare and libraries, admit you were wrong and that easy cuts aren't the answer. Second, if you make an election pledge not to cut public services, don't cut them. Keep that promise. And if you poll 13,000 residents and they say unequivocally that they want to keep those services, listen to them. And if you really think the city is headed towards a critical structural deficit, don't capriciously wipe out valuable revenue tools like a vehicle registration fee, and don't be the only city in the region that refuses to keep the mill rate at the level of inflation. And if you do decide to figure out how to reduce the city's structural deficit, know your numbers. To predict a $775 million deficit, you have to ignore a lot of facts about the budget, like the $80 million left in the reserve from the 2010 budget surplus, and the fact that the non-program revenue predictions for 2011 are $250 million less than was actually earned in 2010, and you've underestimated the revenues for 2012 by a similar amount. How can we have a meaningful discussion about budget needs when there are literally hundreds of millions of dollars unaccounted for? And if you really want to find long-term solutions, don't try to get there by short-term cuts. Read the study that came out yesterday that shows that there are tens of millions of dollars to be made by helping people who are eligible for ODSP get it, so that they don't have to depend on the city's shelters and community services. Read the studies that show... Thank you. Read the studies that show that investing in recreation saves cities money by helping residents lead successful, healthy lives and reducing their dependence on welfare and community services. Invest in social housing and community services and community grants to reduce the cost of policing, hostels, and welfare. Save money by fixing problems and reducing the need for city services rather than just cutting city services and leaving those needs to grow. And while you're at it, contract in commercial garbage collection and benefit from the revenue stream that that creates. The best suggestion I can give you is that if you want to fix a complex problem, have a clear plan based on real facts and full analysis, instead of rushing into simplistic answers based on ideology and guesswork without any time for consideration. I think that would help, Mr. Mayor, and I think we're all looking forward to hearing your plan. Thank you.
Sir, Councillor Perks and Councillor Davis have a question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. So if I was listening, we take the remaining surplus from 2010, we project our non-program revenue like the land transfer tax and our assessment growth for this year and next year at the same level as we got.
Sure. Yeah, we can even pretend that property values aren't going up and we aren't building more property all the time. We can just leave it at 2010 levels, and there's $250 million more right there.
And then another 250 or so for 12 that we could project?
Let's be tough on ourselves and say maybe it'll dip a little in 2012, and so we only get maybe $480 million out of the combination.
So if we do that, plus the other thing, then we're below $300 million in shortfall, not above 700.
We'd
now,
be about.
Can I ask you, if we hadn't cut the vehicle registration fee and frozen taxes last year at a cost of $120 million this year and $100 million off our base next year, would we be almost balanced with a very small tax increase?
We'd have the least challenging deficit we've seen in almost a decade.
Thank you.
Councillor Davis.
And sorry, Councillor Perks, I think I still have a bit of my minute, and I'll add that we probably wouldn't have to cut anything.
Sir, you used up your whole minute. It's Councillor Davis. You have a minute. I'll start it over again. Okay, go ahead.
So do you think that we ought to have the results of the efficiency studies before we make decisions?
I think we actually should do two things. One is we should have the results of those efficiency studies, but the other is that we should not look at everything as if we have to cut our way to success. Sometimes even businesses invest to earn more, and cities can do that too.
Do you think that we ought to have our accurate revenue projections? We ought to have looked at other revenue options. We ought to have looked at impact studies. We ought to have not exited thousands of people out the door before we know what they're going to do?
I think that would be a reasonable strategy for managing a large budget.
And do you think we ought to have all that information together before we made decisions?
I think that you should have all that information together, and then you should look at it over an extended period of time before you make those decisions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, sir. Okay, going down the list here. 318, Lynn Jamel, or Gemel,